heart of Mary. And we heard this beautiful reading of today of the Gospel of Luke, how the Holy Family had been traveling once again to Jerusalem on the occasion of the feast of Easter. And Luke, the evangelist, makes a precise remark. He says, Jesus was 12 years old. And that was not that he said it just as a small remark, but he wanted to indicate something with that. And in fact, what he wanted to indicate is that Jesus, that period after Easter, did his bar mitzvah, did his confirmation, as we would say. Because the Jews, they have something like that as well. There is a bar mitzvah in which the boy coming from age 12, 13 years old is accepted as an adult man into the synagogue, into the community of the Jews. And there is a time of preparation in which he especially needs to study Hebrew and needs to have a bit of a theological sense about what Judaism is all about, a kind of a catechism he needs to do, as most of you, and including our candidates probably when they were younger, did their catechism. And now again, as we heard, most of them studied here at Tangaza, did their theology, maybe even did some Hebrew, I do not know. I'm not sure you would be as able as Jesus was in reading the Holy Scripture in Hebrew, but Jesus there at the age of 12 years in the temple, and you may imagine the Sadducees, the priests being around him, and he would have to read from the Torah. And they would, with their finger, point it out to him where to read. And they would listen very carefully on how he would read it. Because, as anyone who studies Hebrew knows, that is not an easy language to study. Because basically, Hebrew doesn't have any vowels. It only has consonants. And so in a sense, you have to guess the word from the place in the sentence. You have to understand how to pronounce it. It needs a lot of practice, a lot of exercise. And Jesus himself must have been going to school at least for 2, 3, if not 4 years in order to know how to read and write properly Hebrew. And so he did. By the way, it was not only about reading the Holy Scriptures, reading the Torah and the Nevi'im, the prophets, but also was very much about being able to preside the prayer as an adult man would, to preside the prayer in the synagogue, to know the prayers. And also, there was a third one, maybe the most important one, though we don't do that anymore because the temple has been destroyed. The third one was the young man, for the first time in his life, was allowed to bring a sacrifice in the temple. You may imagine how the still young Jesus, 12, 13 years old, with his first beard hairs under his nose, like some of our deacons here, how he was coming into the temple and he had to sacrifice, first time officially there in the temple, a lamb, a 1-year-old lamb for the Lord. And then there was a fourth one. He had to explain Holy Scripture. He had to explain to the Sadducees, to the experts of the law, on how to explain a certain passage in Holy Scripture. It was a kind of an exam, as our friends here are sweating for their exams and they are tested in their oral and written exams. So that was also true for Jesus. So in a sense, Jesus is not so different from ours. He did the same thing, had to go through the same tests, had to show that he was worthy. Jesus in the temple. And something strange happens in the story. Joseph and Mary go back to Nazareth in the caravan. So you might imagine there was the extended family that was traveling. It was not Joseph and Mary only, but there must have been other uncles and aunts and cousins and maybe even friends, all people probably from the same village, from Nazareth. They had come down to Jerusalem, or as the Jew would say, by the way, up to Jerusalem, because you always go up to Jerusalem because Jerusalem is on a hill. And now they were going back to Nazareth. They were going down to Nazareth. It's a journey that would have taken them 4 to 5 days to get there. And it's only, says Luke, in the third day that they suddenly find out that Jesus is not there. They had assumed he was probably with one of the uncles or the aunts, as it goes, children playing around, everybody takes care, everybody takes responsibility. Joseph and Mary didn't think too much of it, and then after 3 days, Mary probably wanted to see about the clothes of Jesus, whether he was still clean or dirty, and she didn't find him anymore. He was gone. So we have to calculate. 3 days they had traveled, 3 days they have to go back, and then another 3-4 days in Jerusalem before they finally find him. Imagine, the boy was lost for nearly 10 days, if not more. Imagine the heart of Virgin Mary and of Joseph. Your son is lost for 10 days. You have no clue. Jerusalem, a big city, 250,000 at the moment, full of pilgrims, not only people there from the city, but many foreigners came in. They say that in the time of Jesus, in the occasion of the big feasts, like especially Easter, the population of the city would double. Many people would come in from all over the place. And there you are, in that big mass of people, you have lost your child. And even though 12 years old, of course, as a parent, you are worried, sick from worry. Where is my son? And of course, then when they finally meet him in the temple, he, relatively innocent, doesn't understand the whole story. Why are they so upset? And Mary, who says to them, like any mother would say, Jesus, what have you done to us? How could you do this to your father and your mother? It reminds me a bit of my own father and mother when I decided at a relatively young age that I wanted to go to the seminary. It was the year 1979. And I had always been a good student at school, was always very much interested in mathematics. My father was an architect, and he saw in me already the son who would follow into his footsteps, becoming an architect as well. And that was also my interest in many ways. And then suddenly the thing came up of becoming a priest, going to the seminary. I still remember that I was talking to my bishop, presenting myself, saying, I want to become a priest, I want to go to the seminary. And that my bishop had a whole discussion with me on what I exactly thought that priesthood was all about. And then somewhere in that conversation it came up that he asked me, he said, and what did your parents say? And I hadn't mentioned it to my parents yet, because I knew what the reaction would be. So my bishop said to me, well, you know, before we continue with this whole conversation, maybe you should go back home and at least speak to your parents. So I took a train back home. I remember still the journey going back home with my heart beating, sweat in my hands, knowing what was going to happen next. So I came home, and I think my father and mother were already home, and so being very undiplomatic as I was, by now I'm a bit more skilled in my diplomacy. At that point I just threw it on the table. I said, Mom and Dad, I have something to tell you. And my mother, she, you know, as mothers are, mothers, they know their sons. She was already, I could see, she was already shaking a bit because she could see from my face I was going to tell her something which probably she would not like. I said, Mom, Dad, you know, I have to tell you something. Tell me, what do you want to tell us? You know, now the neighbors, the oldest daughter was about to marry. And so I said to them, let me just try it from the back. So I said, now, Dorothy, that was the name of the girl, ugly by the way. But finally, and to everyone's surprise, she had found a husband. And so I said, you know that Dorothy is going to marry very soon. Yeah. It wasn't like 3, 4 weeks time. So I said to them, to my mother and my father, I said, now, if she waits a bit, then maybe I can preside the wedding. So my father and my mother looked at me. What do you mean? Preside? You're too young, you cannot marry her. I said, no, I don't want to marry her. God forbid, I mean, she was 50 years older than me. No, but when you go to church, who presides the wedding? And I could see in the face of my mother that the coin dropped. I said, no. She said, no. And my father still didn't understand it because probably he was still busy designing some kind of house in his head. As men do generally, like women, be careful with men, because men normally do not listen. Men, we always are with our thoughts somewhere else. So anyway, so my father, I think I should become a priest, so I want to go to the seminary. Classes start in 1 month. My father slammed with his fist on the table. Over my dead body. Over my dead body. You don't know what you're getting into. You have no clue what you decided. You're too young. You go to the university, you finish the university, and once you finish the university, then we talk again. Not now. Yeah, but no. We don't discuss this. We're not going to discuss this. And my mother, as women do, she was just crying. So then I said, okay, let me not go further into that because we are not going anywhere with this at this point. So after a week, I tried again, and trying to get them used to the idea. And my father slowly but surely started to understand that basically I was not ready to give up on this, and that I started to move ahead in spite of him saying no. By the way, that is what boys do at the age of 19, 20, 21. You will always do something which your parents do not like. And so I went to the seminary, and looking back on it afterwards, I understood more than at that point, because I was young, how much I hurt my parents. It took my parents a long time to get used to the idea. Maybe, by the way, for some of you parents, that is also the case. Maybe sometimes, even though you don't say it, in your mind or in your heart, you might even think, what is this son of me up to? What is this all going to bring? What kind of future will that be? And last but not least, will he be able to persist? Will he be able to be faithful? Because especially when you're a bit older and you have a bit more experience, as you parents have, because that's why you are a parent, then you also know that life as this grass can be very muddy. In life, and that there can be many problems you had not even foreseen, and challenges and pain and struggles. And yes, you might get dirty because of the mud in life. And people might talk, as people talk in a parish. I remember how my parents struggled with all that. And just not long ago, I saw a picture again of me, still being very young, as a very young priest, 1987, accompanied by my father and mother to church. And you see still, if I look at it now, you still see the tension in their face. They still were thinking, what is this man up to? By the way, but that is the way mothers are then. At the moment that she understood I was going to be a diplomat in the church, because that's the way mothers are, no? By the way, much later, I was already many years a diplomat. I think it must have been end of the 90s, beginning of 2000. Both my parents died, by the way. At the beginning of 2000, once again, I had a discussion with my father on the same issue. And then he came up with a very interesting story. And he said, because my father was a very staunch and devoted Catholic. And then he said to me, you know, when you and my mother got married, by the way, my mother was a beautiful woman. You can still see it a bit, no? When you and my mother got married, we always prayed that one of our sons would become a priest. But we never thought of you. Because always I had been the naughty one at home. The one you had to drag to church. The one who didn't really want to. While my younger brother, who is the father of four himself now, and the grandfather, he was the one. Even censorship is coming in at this point. But he was the one who should have been the priest. You see, in many ways, the plans of God are unpredictable. You plan, but then something unexpected happens and everything changes again. And that is true in marriage. All parents who are sitting here, they know about that. You go into marriage. You know, there's a good friend, I've mentioned it before, but this good friend of mine who got married, by the way, Joseph, his name, and he got married, and a week or two later, we